Let me start with this tweet before we go right down the rabbit hole. So this guy, Jeremy Boring, is the co-founder of the Daily Wire, which is probably the biggest like right-wing tradcon sort of space out there right now. I thought it was hilarious the way that he handled the Gillette toxic masculinity bit, countering it with his own razors, countering the Hershey's wokeness with his chocolate bars. So again, entertaining, agree with much of what they say, but again, where they get lost in the weeds and really screw up things and lead guys down into the slaughterhouse is with their whole notion that you should just still marry, regardless of the difficulties, regardless of the environment, regardless of the laws, regardless, they still say march into the slaughterhouse. So let me go and frame this with his tweet, which I kind of discussed the other day briefly on my general show, but I'm going to go deeper down this on a solo moment. So if you watch that, just bear with me. So Mr. Boring here, you can go follow him on Twitter. He says he's the co-founder of Real Daily Wire and Jeremy's Razors. He says the red pill attack on marriage is evil. Divorce is also evil. No-fault divorce is particularly evil. Divorce when children are in the picture is one of the most evil acts a person can engage in. Well, it is what it is, man. People part ways. And I agree. Children generally do better in a household where there's two parents involved. Children also generally do better when they're raised by a single father versus a single mother. Statistically speaking, single fathers do a far better job than single mothers, and single fathers basically do almost as good a job as a two-parent household. So there's that as well. All of these acts of evil are common because evil is common and we are all given it from time to time, but that does not change what they are. The notion of good versus evil is funny here, the way that it's being framed. It's like there's good and there's bad, and that side is bad. So it's us versus them, basically, is what it is. And we've always lived in an us versus them world. Jack Donovan talks about it in The Way of Men and his other stuff. That's what we are. We're tribes. The way of men is the way of the gang, as he says. So when he's talking about evil, he's trying to distinguish that tribe over there. Anybody that says that marriage is a bad idea and divorce as a consequence of a bad marriage choice is also a bad idea, they're on that side. They're on the evil side. So I guess by definition, I'm evil. All of these acts of evil are common because evil is common. We are all given it from time to time, but that does not change who we are. The fact that women initiate 80% of divorce is evidence that some manifestations of evil are more common in women. Ooh, he's calling women evil now. Something society, and frustratingly Christian society, has been trying to obscure since we turned over all of our moral authority to women in a 20th century. Okay, well, you can blame the churches for that, dude. Like that's, like all of the religious crowds out there, this guy inclusive with all of his Daily Wire, gang as well, subscribe to organized religion, some of them are Jewish, some are Christian, Catholic, whatever it happens to be, but they all subscribe to a certain organized religion, which falls under the umbrella of the marriage or some form of marriage, as they like to call it. He goes on to say it's also evidence of a deep societal sickness, one that creates enormous incentives for women to divorce and virtually, though not absolutely, none for men. So he's still blaming women here. The red pill rightly observe much of the sickness. They even rightly diagnose much of it. Okay, well, nothing new there. But then they turn on the institution itself. They're not turning, I don't think, my understanding, my impression anyway, from the time when I would collaborate with the Mano Swamp was they're not turning on the institution. My impression, my understanding, I mean, some of them are even married to this day. My understanding was that it's just a bad deal. And when guys get together and they swap notes and they have conversations about deals that are available out there to them, then they just say, I'm not turning on it. I'm just not doing it, right? Turning on it is, in my estimation, very, very different than just not inviting it into your life. But he's trying to conflate those two things. Anyway, an institution fundamental to human flourishing male flourishing, the flourishing of children, and the flourish of society. An institution that is, when rightly ordered, the great metaphor of our relationship with Christ. Here we go with the religious stuff. There were some notes here that I took from a video that Matt Walsh literally just published shortly before I went live, I think in the last half an hour. Actually, I'll save that for a minute. Let me just finish reading the tweet so I can sort of segue into that. Marriage makes men men. Marriage saves men and is a picture of the salvation of men. How does marriage make men men? Let's just ask ourselves this question for a moment. Let's just marinate on that. How does getting married make a man a man? Like, what defines a man? Like, how is it that a marriage defines a man? I'm genuinely curious. And chat, you guys let me know right now how you see marriage defining a man, because I don't see marriage making a man, making a man. Maybe becoming a father is what he's trying to say makes you a man. But getting married, how does that make you a man? You know, they're trying to propose here that marriage has been around since the beginning of time. This is one of the sound bites that I heard Matt Walsh just say in his last published video. And thousands of years, tens of thousands of years. Marriage isn't that old of an institution. I mean, humans have been around a lot longer than marriage has been around. Roughly since the time of agriculture, right? You know, we've been talking about this notion of something that looks like marriage, except for back then, the interests seem to be more around the notion of blending in-laws, right? There's a book Stephanie Kuntz wrote. I talk about it in my book, The Unplugged Alpha. It's called Marriage, a History. And throughout the vast majority of time, it wasn't about making men men or saving men or the salvation of men, like Jeremy Boring says here. It was about the acquisition of in-laws. There wasn't much in the way of government. There wasn't much in the way of schooling, policing, medical care, care for the elders. There was no infrastructure back then. So to acquire in-laws would have made much more sense. Also, when you had stuff because of agriculture, like land and oxen and chickens and goats and all this kind of shit, you had family to sort of pass it down to, because you would generally stay put, versus before it was nomadic hunter-gathering, right? Which is how we operated for millions of years prior to the last few thousand years where we got into agriculture. So marriage never made men men, right? I think it would be safe to argue other things in life made men men, like being able to acquire food, acquire resources, you know, bear children, had nothing to do with marriage. The notion of marriage came from the notion of the acquisition of in-laws. Her side of the family had big, strong men and some women that had some skills. Maybe there was nursing skills. Maybe there was education skills. Maybe there was farming skills. Maybe there was policing skills. My side of the family had these skills, and you would blend the families and you would acquire in-laws. And that was the origin of it. Now, religion, you know, you can talk about religion, the different kinds of religion. They all believe that they're the right one. There's thousands of them. Set that aside for a minute. I don't think for a minute that marriage makes men men. That's a crock of shit. You know, I think that you and I watching this understand that that's just a shaming tactic. It's like, if you don't do this and you're not a man. Really? Like, is I don't know, who can we use an example? Leonardo DiCaprio. Is Leonardo DiCaprio not a man because he plays the field, because he deals with younger women, and if they don't you know, work with him or whatever, he just lets them go, pass, you know, replace? Is he not a man? Right? Because I think other men want to be him and other women want to be with him. So how is he not a man? Like, how does marriage make men men? It doesn't add up. It's just a straight up empty argument. That's a shaming tactic, right? Blah, 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 just blah, 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 right? We should fight to make marriage marriage. Okay, so here's the fight part of it, right? Let's keep fighting to make marriage marriage. Like, their version of marriage is what they want. They don't want the state version involved in it. They want their religious version of marriage being marriage, where everybody sort of does that and everybody else in society does that as well, so they can have a big party together with the you know, us crowd. You know, this is us all together being married. We must defend men's rights in marriage. Here we go with the men's rights shit. We've seen how effective men's rights groups have been at trying to defend men or defend men's rights in a long-term relationship. And they've been going around for decades now. And some might argue, well, they've been somewhat effective or remotely effective, or they've accomplished this, that, or the other thing. But at the end of the day, the truth of the matter is fewer people are getting married. Of those that do get married, they don't live in happy long-term marriages. And the vast majority of them end up getting divorced, right? If you look at the stats when it comes to marriage, so what is it? It's something like 54% end up in a state of divorce. Second marriages have an even higher failure rate. And then it doesn't account for the ones that stayed married that don't either have the option to leave, or they're staying for the kids, or whatever number of reasons they just stay. And they've surveyed people. I've got stats and data on this on my podcast, and there's even a standalone video that I did on the Entrepreneurs in Cars channel, and I quoted it in my book as well, that after 8 years, only 13% of people report being in a state of love, meaning I still love my wife or my girlfriend, and the woman being I am still absolutely in love with my husband / boyfriend, whatever it happens to be. That's a shitty number by any metric. 13% is a horrible number, right? And then if you look at bliss, which is really what they sell marriage as, is, oh, it's a state of bliss. It makes men men. It saves men, family, love, blah, 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 all this sort of stuff. So if you look at the notion of bliss, which I think is what guys are generally sold, and women too, with Disney and prince and princesses and all this bullshit, less than 3% of people over that same period of time, 8 years, report being in a state of bliss. So what exactly is the point of this if it's got an extremely high failure rate? And for those of them that stay together, the vast majority of them are unhappy. There's a very, very small percentage of them that are happy. It's like rolling the dice on freaking casino 13 or something like that, the roulette table, whatever it is you're going to play. Like the odds of winning are low. It's like playing the lottery, 649, or wherever you happen to live. Are there people that are in happy long-term marriages? Sure. I know maybe one or two, and it came with a series and a long sequence of huge issues as well. There's things that are precursors to good marriages, and I'll talk about that in a bit. Let me just make a note here. Good marriages. Let's talk about that, right? So let's keep reading this week. We must defend men's right, but we must not abandon marriage. Well, we must not. Again, us versus them. It's us. Are you in the us crowd where we must not abandon marriage? Are you in the us crowd, right? That's basically what he's saying, right? Them, they're going to abandon it. Us, we don't abandon it. We hold firm. But 80% of marriages are untied by women. So you don't have any control of that, right? If she says, I'm bored, I want out, Kevin from sales looks good, I'm banging the pool, whatever it happens to be, doesn't matter. But if 80% of the time the knot is untied because women want to untie it, it's not generally men that are untying the knot. It's generally women that are untying the knot. To abandon marriage is to abandon the fight beneath the fight. We have to fight for every fucking thing in life right now, right? So we have to fight for marriage, or what they're calling, what makes men men and all this sort of stuff. The fight on which all other fights are premised. What a crock of shit. The fight on which all other fights are really, anti-marriage is anti-life. Well, how did we get here today? We all exist today not because of marriage, but because a man and a woman got together, were intimate, and a baby popped out 9 months later. Marriage had nothing to do with that for millions of years. So saying that anti-marriage is anti-life is just stupid. It is the dumbest thing that you could possibly state, with an ego investment in an institution that clearly doesn't work, that's set up for failure for the most part. You cannot be conservative and anti-marriage because they're a conservative platform. They're saying if you're reading this and you're a conservative, you can't be on their side. You have to be on our side. So this is Jeremy Boring, which reads quite boring after you've read it a couple times. I really hope you guys enjoyed that clip. If you want to watch the full-length podcast, you can find that over here, that clip's from. If you're newer to the channel, make sure you hit subscribe over here, and pin down below in the top comment, you'll find a bunch of useful links to my website, my supplement line books, and a bunch of other stuff. Have an amazing day. Peace out.